Good morning and welcome to Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson, best-selling author and accomplished public speaker specializing in education and educational leadership. I am your co-host, Jeremy Johnson, organizational psychology consultant specializing in career coaching, training, and development. Meet us here each week to discuss topics in education and leadership and meet with some of the top education talent and thought partners from across the globe. So grab your latte, sit back, and enjoy a relaxed conversation that will leave you informed and encouraged. This morning we have a very special guest. We have with us Dr. Ciara O'Donnell. How are you doing today?
I'm very good, Jeremy.
Good
Great.
morning. Yeah, thank you for being with us today. We're so excited to hear your story and a little bit about what's going on in the educational world in Ireland.
Great. Thanks for the invite. Excited to be here.
Oh, great. Yeah, so let's dive right in. Can you tell us just a little bit about your journey so far and maybe some of the stuff that you've been working on recently?
Yeah, Jeremy. Well, I trained as a primary school teacher in
Mm-hmm.
the 80s and went straight into the classroom, working in schools mainly that were in areas of socio-economic disadvantage,
Mm-hmm.
which was very challenging but very rewarding. And during that time, I actually took on a very specific role as a homeschool community liaison coordinator, which
Oh,
meant
wow.
my role was working directly with parents of the most marginalized children. And so I stepped out of the classroom for about 7 years, working with the parents who most needed help in terms of helping them realize what an asset they are to their children's education. These are parents that probably wouldn't have had good experiences of school themselves, or who wouldn't have achieved like we would, say what achievement is. And it was developing them as the primary educators of their children, with a focus particularly on literacy and numeracy, and a focus on strengthening links between the home and the school. So some of these parents were terrified of coming into the school. Like they left the kids at the gate. And after that, they wanted very little else to do with it. My job was to break those barriers down and show school as a welcoming environment for parents, as legitimate educators of their kids. And likewise, that it was my job to go into their homes and bring school philosophy into their homes as well. So I did that for 7 years. And I've got to say that I was a better teacher after that, because I went back to the classroom with expectations that were now realistic, whereby I used to worry about kids coming in with their homework not done. Now I was saying, well, these kids have turned up. Isn't it great that they're here?
Yeah, that's great.
Given what they're coming from. So I did that for 7 years, and then I moved into teacher education in 2005. We had a huge reform agenda in Ireland at the time, where the curriculum was being reformed, and a number of teachers were released from their school to train other teachers at national level. And I became part of that team who basically supported teachers with the implementation of this brand new curriculum. And cutting a very long story short, that was 2005, and I rose to the ranks of leadership in that organization. In 2011, or 2012 rather, I became the national director of Ireland's first cross-sectoral, and by that I mean primary and post-primary, secondary and primary, service for teachers that supported them in all areas of their professional development. So their leadership skills, literacy, numeracy, well-being, digital technologies, you name it, it was under our remit to support experienced teachers through change and to support them as professionals in their own professional growth. So I became leader of that in 2012. It was a team of about 200 people that were borrowed from their school with the intention of returning to that school. And that was really where my research interests lay. I wanted to find out what happens to these people, like me, when they leave school to become a teacher educator. And the intention is that they will go back. Do they go back? My research showed no, they don't. And has been supported by a number of other international studies. Policy would assume that these people come out, they do this job for a while, they gain all these skills, and then they go back and spread the good word. Um, that's not happening. And my research showed that where it has happened and where people have returned to school, things like leadership or certain cultures in schools does not really allow for their knowledge to be shared.
Mm. Mm.
Particularly if people are threatened or frightened about change, or you know what, we're good. Let's leave things the way they are. We don't really want any evangelistic views coming in about how things should be in the school. So my research looked at that, and in particular, it challenged a key assumption of policy in Ireland. In Ireland, the people like me who are released from their schools to join a service like this, they are only allowed to do the job for 5 years, 5 years maximum, after which it is intended they go back. Also, for every one of those five
Mm.
years, the school and the Department of Education has to sanction annually their secondment. So it's not guaranteed that they're going to be back every year. And it's not even going to be guaranteed if they're going to be there for the whole 5 years. So it's very unpredictable. It's a very precarious career position. And
Mm.
what my research found was that these people came into me as teachers, but they weren't teacher educators yet. That was another skill entirely, that they had to develop a whole new set of skills. They had to become something else. It didn't mean that they were leaving their teacher selves behind, but they had to acquire another identity as a teacher of other teachers. And that was challenging for them because remember, some of these people were
Mm.
leading teachers through change, and that wasn't always very welcome. So you had to develop sophisticated skills of persuasion and influence and facilitation. So, what my research found was, and backed up by the literature, it took these people 3 years to nail those skills. Now, here's the thing,
Oh,
these people only had 5 years in the job.
yeah.
By year three, they were going, "Hey, I've just nailed this. I just got it, and I've got to go in 2 years, and I don't really want to go back to school. So,
Mm.
if I don't have a future here and going back to school is not what I want either, then I'm going to look for something else in the system where I can have stability and I can use the skills that I'm not sure will be used to their optimum level at school."
Wow.
Mm.
There's there's like 3 or 4 things in there that I really want you to kind of dive into a little bit more. And this isn't really how we scheduled it, but this is such good stuff, and it's so pertinent, even in the U.S. These things that you're saying. So I actually have several questions for you about it.
Sure, sure.
First of all, the teachers, like you said, the new skill set, I think that's one of the biggest problems we have with professional development because our teachers are trained in pedagogy, which is how to teach children. And so moving into that level of teaching adults is called, I don't know if I get the word right, but andragogy
Mhm.
is the word. And that's a different skill set and that's a different mindset. And so that's one of the problems that I see in the US. And one of the things that I talk about is teachers often see their professional development as irrelevant because the people doing it are trying to teach them like they're a child, and they're not a child. They're an expert. They have, expertise, degrees, experience. So it's a different mindset in how you approach and how you teach them. And so I can definitely see that being a big issue with that. When you talked about them going back and some of people not wanting to implement, when a teacher leaves the school to go work with you or to train with you, um, does the principal or the administrators of that school, do they have a say, or is it does some of them like do it reluctantly, or maybe they're told to let a teacher go?
Yeah, do you know what's a really, really good question? I mean, you are depending on the generosity of the school principal and the school to let this person go. And in 90% of the cases, I've never known a school principal to stand in the way of a teacher who really wants this. Um, People who want this job, and I don't want to be overgeneralized here, Brad, but people who want this job are looking to scratch a leadership itch in their career. They don't necessarily want to be a school principal, but they do want to do something different. They want an added challenge. They want to broaden the horizons because sometimes the classroom can be quite narrow. They want additional challenge. And good leaders recognize that and they let them go. Having said that, it is at the discretion of the school leader at any time to say, we need you back. We have perhaps have a shortage of teachers here, or your skill set is needed. So the needs of the school and the children, and I think it's only right, comes first. But the other people that have a little bit of power in this regard are the Department of Education, Brad, because the Department of Education can change their targets every now and again and decide, do you know what? I don't know if we're going to focus on this now. We're going to move on to something else. So we don't really need those people.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to target a different group. So you are at the mercy of the vagaries of policy and the moving targets of policy. But you're also at the mercy, and maybe not the mercy, but you are depending on your school, the goodwill of your school to allow you to go.
I was just thinking here in the US, a lot of districts change things so often that I don't know any of them that have kept anything for 5 years anyway. Uh, so that's very different too. The other
Yeah,
thing I would love for you to share just a little bit more on, because Jeremy asks this often, and maybe it's something to. I'll throw you the question so you can think about it when he asks you the next question. Then he can ask this to you a little bit later on in the process. But
okay,
when we talk a lot about building community, and I find that so interesting that that was your role, was to actually go out into the homes and build that, um, because you gained a whole different perspective. So yeah, maybe have that in the back of your mind while he asked
sure.
you the next one. But I do want to come back to that, because I want educators and leaders here in the US to understand a little bit more about, the importance of that, how it changed you, because you talked about, you had a different vision when you came back. you know is homework done versus I'm glad you were able to show up today. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that is a tremendous, like, eye-opening experience that is something I want you to talk about a little bit later. So yeah, I'll just let you put that in your mind, and then we'll move on to the next. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Yeah. So kind of going past your initiative with the parents, can you speak on the importance and maybe some other initiatives that you're a part of um, that attempted to expand that influence outside of just the school and the parents into the local community?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we the at the core of the homeschool community scheme was the
Hmm.
fact that it takes a community to educate a child. It takes a community to develop a
Absolutely.
child. And the three pillars in this community were the school, the home, and the community. What do we mean by
Hmm.
community? We meant any agency or anybody else in the community whose work ultimately impinges on the child and their learning.
Hmm.
Voluntary groups, funding groups, philanthropic and otherwise.
Hmm.
But the whole idea was to use the community as a resource. And it's funny because during COVID, over here in Ireland, we saw the community coming into its own when schools were closed. And I can remember looking at that and saying, wow, we were doing that when the homeschool community liaison scheme was introduced. We were already, dissolving the barriers between home and school. And I suppose the other point I'd like to make on that, Jeremy, was some teachers in the school, and this is not a criticism, they didn't really like the idea of parents being too involved.
Hmm.
They've one job, we've another. The whole idea of me saying, there's going to be a couple of parents coming into your classroom, and I'm going to get them to sit at desks and do some mathematical games or whatever. Oh no, I don't want that. This is my fortress.
Uh,
This is my place, and that was a challenge for me in terms of changing staff mindsets. So it wasn't just the
yeah.
parental
Good deal. Yeah.
mindset you were working on. You were working on staff who had perhaps entrenched assumptions about these parents, maybe, but also entrenched assumptions about this classroom is my world, and it's
Mm.
my domain, and
Yeah.
I'm just not comfortable with exposing it to anybody else, at least not parents.
Hmm.
I think we see that in the US as well, that there's kind of that gap, which there shouldn't be, but you know um it's like parents are kind of scared of the teachers and the teachers are kind of scared of the parents. And I think it's just because there is such a lack of communication and a lack of interaction. So you don't know what you don't know. Um,
True. You know what, Brad? I found that it took a long time to build up trust with parents. I mean, I didn't just rock up into somebody's house and all of a sudden become their best mate. This took months. This took years of going into their houses and talking to them about the most benign things that had nothing to do necessarily with education. But
Hmm.
you had to build that very, very gradually, and they had to learn to trust you.
Yeah, and that's so true, and that's in any, relationship, really.
Yeah.
Even, when I think of like school leaders with the teachers, is yeah, it's those conversations that are about nothing or that aren't about school anyway. It's about family life, little things.
Oh,
Those little types of conversations are what you just said build trust, and then when you build
couldn't
that
agree
trust,
more.
you can go to the next, to the more important things, or maybe they're not any more important, but the things you're ultimately wanting to get to with school and things. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, and I have to say on that because it was something I was going to raise. When you think about the everyday life of school, and you, as a school leader, you think about the stuff that most influences what happens in your school every day. It is those conversations. It's the conversation with the parent. It's the conversation with the child. It's the unintentional word on the corridor that you don't know has made a huge difference to somebody. Every conversation counts. And I believe that relationships and trust are built one conversation at a time.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that is. And say that again so that they understand that is the truth.
Yeah, that I think conversations, no matter how small or pointless they may seem at the time, never underestimate their power. You don't know the difference you might make by just stopping and giving somebody a few minutes of your time.
Mm.
Every conversation matters, and I think trust and relationships are built on one conversation at a time.
Oh, I love that. That is so
Absolutely.
powerful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Yeah, there's actually a lot of research, especially workplace related, that shows just a direct correlation between the sharing of non-work information to the sharing of work information. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
that's the foundation of trust is
Oh, and I mean,
um,
Jeremy, like
yeah.
trust, I mean, that's something I really wanted to raise today. And I know it sounds like a very, very obvious one. It's a small little word, but it's the cornerstone of, of
Hmm.
authentic leadership. And it's multi layered and it is
Mm.
rooted in relationships. I mean, first of all, you've got this whole idea of credibility. Can people really believe that whatever I'm saying or telling them is true? Like credibility is not only about knowing your stuff or being an expert. It's actually people saying this person's not paying lip service here. This person's not bluffing. It's about reliability. If I say to somebody, I will call you back, that I will,
Mhm.
or I will follow up and do that. That I will, and then getting to your point, Jeremy, about the intimacy and bothering to get to know people, taking a real interest, remembering their name,
Mhm.
asking them something about what happened. Oh, the last time we met, your mom wasn't well. How's she now? Like people really appreciate that you remember those things.
Oh,
Hmm.
so true, so true. I've shared, I think, a couple of times. I'll have, I'll speak to this, and then I'll have like teachers message me and say, I wish my principal just knew my name. And it's like, what a horrible environment to go to work in when you feel so undervalued.
Yeah, yeah, and I had a big organization, Brad, and I that was although there was 200 people, I was absolutely adamant that I would know them all by name, no matter what their rank or status. That had to happen. Like somebody's name is the first word they learn, probably, and it's definitely the first word they learn to write. So it's crucial. And I think, for trust to be forthcoming, you need to be credible, you need to be reliable. And I think people must believe that your actions and words are not about self interest.
Mm.
They're not about your ego, that it's about them.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's really good. Thank you.
So you had mentioned earlier about some of the challenges for teachers to go from teaching children to adult learners. So what qualities do you think made the biggest impact on their ability to, either effectively, perform that role or to learn how to do that?
Yeah. I think Brad put it really well earlier when he really put his finger on one of the key challenges of making a transition from a teacher to teacher educator. There is an assumption that I'm a good teacher, so I'm going to be a good teacher of teachers. Yeah,
Hmm.
you've got your pedagogical expertise, you've got your classroom experience and all that perspective. But exactly like you said, Brad, we're now moving from pedagogy into andragogy. You're working with an audience of people who have a wealth of experience. You're working with an audience of people that don't want to be talked down to or told this is how you do it right. You know, and I mean, for me, that was core to their training. That adult learners and child learners, although there is some overlap and some similarities, there are key differences as well. And the main one being that these people bring a wealth of experience into that room with them, and that they don't appreciate being told that the way they're doing things is the wrong way.
I
Hmm.
think
You
that
know?
is one of the big ones that really sticks out and that I've noticed, and you said it perfectly, is being talked to like their children.
Yeah.
That's because that's one of the issues teachers have with administrators that,
Okay.
or they talk to the teachers like they would talk to students, and it's like you said, it kind of devalues them and their professionalism. So I think that's one of the big ones that really needs to be a focus of people that train teachers needs to realize.
Yeah.
You're having a conversation with an adult. You're not telling someone what to do.
And the other interesting thing is, I mean, this is typical of novice teacher educators because I was there myself. That when you first start doing this job, you have a tendency to want to please your audience.
Mm,
So you'll kind of maybe, they'll say, look, I mean, our job as teacher educators is not to give people the answers. It's to facilitate people to come to their own answers because they're the ones who know their school and know their kids better than anybody. But
Hmm.
sometimes teachers are under such stress. They'll often say, will you just tell us how to do it? Because we just want to know, how do you fix this? And it can be very tempting to say, yeah, okay, I'll sort this for you, and maybe feel that you're being judged as a good teacher educator because you're fixing something for somebody else. But ultimately, you're not doing that. You're disempowering them by doing it that way.
mm,
So your job is to ask the right questions. It's to lead them, to be able to say, you've got this. This is in here already. My job is just to pull it out, not to put ideas into your head, to get the great ideas that are in there out. And the other challenge that these people had was, remember, Brad and Jeremy, these people were mediating messages of big change that a
mm,
lot of teachers didn't want to hear for understandable reasons. So we were out there in the front line. We were the lightning rod of a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, because we were the messengers. And sometimes, if I'm really honest, one of my main challenges was, where the team said to me, Ciara, we're delivering a message, and I'm not sure we really believe in it. I don't know if we really like this message.
mm.
What do we do? There's a loyalty tug here. Policy is telling us to say one thing to teachers, and in our hearts, we're going, God, this is really tough on teachers. I'm not sure we can really expect them to do this. And I learned that the way around that was to me to say to my team, tell me what the teachers are telling you. Tell me the struggles they're having with policy's message. And I saw my role as to feed those concerns that my team heard teachers telling them back to policy and say, look, I know your intentions are good here, but this is what we're hearing out there. This is how they're struggling with it. So, can we reach a point here whereby the ideals that you're mediating can be made somewhat realistic for people who are struggling with that on a daily basis? So I saw myself and our team, well, my team more than me, because they're the ones that gave the information I needed, as a bridge between policy and practice.
I
Very
think one of the
sides.
I think one of the problems with policy is that the people that make it are so far removed from the process. That's one of my frustrations with the US, but I know it's global.
It
is
is.
that we have people making policy and they never take time to get input from the people in the field, the experts that are in the field. And I think that could cut out a lot of, the issues, or at least some of them. But yeah, I definitely see
And
that. But
I've got to say that that was my biggest challenge in the job, Brad, for the 10 years that I was in that role. When you know something is not working, and you know it's not right, and you're trying to impress that upon people who are somewhat removed. They are, and very often I rattled cages. I'll be honest, by sitting at those tables and maybe saying some inconvenient truths that they didn't want to hear.
Mm.
And I wasn't doing it to be awkward. I wasn't doing it to be a pain in the neck. I was doing it because I saw as my duty to represent the profession,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and the realities that they were facing.
Yeah, you were their voice, exactly.
Yeah, and I didn't change the world or anything, but I thought, I'm in a position of influence here, and perhaps I can help.
That is so important, to be able to advocate for others and your school and your teachers and your kids, and that's so important. There's not enough people that are doing that.
I mean, I
Um,
was fiercely protective
yeah,
about my team. Now, I know
yeah,
everybody says, oh,
good, yeah.
every parent thinks their own kids are the best. Well, and I genuinely thought that. I genuinely thought that about my team, because they worked hard to get to the level of proficiency that it took 3 years for all of them to make that leap from teacher to teacher educator, to make that leap from being a courageous person who stepped into the arena in front of these audiences and dared greatly, as Brené Brown said. So I was immensely proud of them and immensely protective of them. And I had their back. And do you know what? I would do it all over again and make no apology for that.
But that's good
Mhm.
leadership. So we
Yeah, that is,
appreciate that.
yeah.
And I know they did too.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I look like when we talk about the good qualities of a good leader, or what do you think? I always ask myself, what worked for you? Well, that worked for me. It worked for me to be their champion. And,
Yeah,
and I believed in being their champion, but it also worked for me because I got tenfold back.
Mm, mm.
You know,
yeah, yeah,
they never sought any exemption, but to give the very best of themselves and more.
yeah.
Yeah, I've always said, when leaders have teachers back, there's not much they won't do for them because they just, they appreciate that, more than
Absolutely.
probably anything else. Yeah.
I mean, but people, if people believe they can do great things, they will do great things.
Yeah, we definitely, appreciate that message that went above and beyond for your team and your school. And but I am curious, was there somebody that did that for you? Tell us about maybe a leader or mentor
Oh, that's
that
a
you've
really,
worked with. Yeah.
really lovely question. I'm really glad you asked that because, really, I'm a product of anything I've achieved. I really believe I'm a product of the great people that I saw, that I evidenced in leadership. And there is one person I am going to mention him by name, and his name is Dr. Jared McHugh. He was a school principal here in Ireland, but he ran an education centre here in Ireland, and also was the managerial body over the organisation, the professional development service for teachers that I led.
Mm,
But Jared was always my cheerleader, and he was always in my corner, and he would remind me of my strengths when I doubted myself. But
Mhm.
this is the thing. He also was able to gently bring me to a level of self-awareness with regard to my blind spots. And he wouldn't just tell me, he wouldn't say, oh, you're doing this wrong. But the most powerful thing he ever said to me, and I still remember this, was that our strengths can be our friends. But if our strengths are overplayed, they can become our weakness.
mm,
So celebrate what you're doing well, but know that maybe when you're stepping into a zone where those behaviors may become too amplified and are
mhm.
not helping you. And in my case, it was probably that my passion is an asset, but then maybe that could go into the space of being overzealous.
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
could undo some of the good stuff that I was achieving by being passionate. So he reminded me of that, and he was one of those people who had a gift of bringing me to a solution without telling me what to do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big one there. As leaders, and even just in life, my thing is it's more important to know to ask the right questions than to even have the right answer sometimes. And
You know what? That's good for kids too. Yeah,
because that's critical thinking, and it allows you, to um, not just be on one mindset, but to listen to other. When you do that, um, I think it's just shows like I said, critical thinking ability, and allows you to receive input from others to be able to make the
absolutely.
best decision.
I mean, well, I'm a great fan of Stephen Covey. And I really am, and I would have quoted him and used his work in the 10 years that I was leader of that organization. Exactly what you said there, Brad. This whole idea of listening to understand, really, really listening. Stepping into somebody's world for a few minutes, forgetting your own. God, when people feel listened, there's very few ways to make them feel more valued than
Right.
if you listened. The other person I should mention there, Jeremy, with regard to leader, is the principal who released me from my school to do this job, the person who had the generosity to let me go. Her name is Miss Maura Sweeney, also a principal, now retired. But there's a person who, like, I don't mind telling you, I was a good teacher, and she knew I was a good teacher, but she also saw something in me that I could contribute somewhere else, and she was happy to let that go. And she
Yeah.
put that advertisement on my desk and said, I think you should apply for this.
Oh,
And I didn't see it. She said, I think you'd be really good at this. I didn't see it, but she did. And I am indebted to her for the journey I've had since. And if there's one thing that unites all of those people, Gerard, Maura, and Dr. Concepta, who would have been the pioneer of that homeschool scheme that is still in operation in Ireland, every single one of them did their work out of service.
Mm.
And I know, Brad, you place huge value on that in your work, and it's one of the reasons why we were a fan of your work, because leadership is everybody, I believe, who is in any way involved in education is in service. In service. Everything we do, everything we say is driven by service. It's not about you, it's about others. It's not about your position, your role, your status. It's not about rank. It's about service to the job and service and being in service to others. I mean, and I believe it, like when I read about people like Sir Giovanni and Robert Greenleaf, that servant leadership and morals are first cousins. You
Mm.
cannot separate
Mm.
them. And
right.
education is such a moral enterprise. Like, it's not transactional. It's not a business. It's a transformational enterprise. It's messy. It's complex. It's about making judgments all the time on moral dilemmas. And that's why I really believe that the antithesis of servant orientated leadership is that kind of leadership that feels it's okay just to issue directives from the top. I can make a decision without getting any consultation from anybody else. Don't you dare send an email until I see it first. Now, and I've
Mm.
seen that. And those people who feel that need to be in control, well, they might make good managers, but don't call yourself a leader.
No,
Mm.
and I've never heard that before, how you put that earlier when you talked about it's not transactional leadership. That's I think you said that's easy to do, but I was thinking that's actually lazy leadership because like you said, it takes work. You got to get into the middle of the real work with servant leadership with that mindset of, the relationships, and it is hard work. It does take more effort. So in a way, yeah, when I think about that, the leaders that would rather just send directives or whatever and not deal with issues and let me micromanage everything you do, that really is, that's more of that's we know that's the least effective way, but it's To me,
Yeah,
I guess I see it as lazy just because, like I said, they're not willing to jump in and do the work with the people and build the relationships and
yeah.
get into the deep stuff.
And you know what, Brad? Couldn't agree more. I tell you, yes. Not only is it lazy, but it's staying comfortable,
Hmm.
staying hidden behind your databases, your Excel sheets, your paperwork. Oh, I've got all my policies in a row. I've got all my admin done. Well, you know what? The oil that fuels an organization is not your paperwork. The oil that fuels your organization are the people in it.
Absolutely.
That they're your biggest asset.
Hmm.
Getting, and like I said earlier on, getting to know them, stepping into their world. I mean, I remember, often putting aside, um, best example, like it's as a leader, it's dropping the things that you think are important, like the paperwork or the reporting, dropping it to let go and meet a team that are in crisis. I had a situation there many years ago when a group of my, one of my teams were about 120 kilometers from my office. I got a call to say, look, a few of the teams have got a few nasty texts. They're just a bit freaked by them. Like, it's not a police investigation or anything, but they're really worried. Now, it's tempting to say, "Oh, will you deal with that?" And I said, "No. Do you know what? I'm not going to drive down." Now, I didn't make any huge difference with the problem, but the fact that I dropped stuff, and when actually it would have been easier to stay where I was, because then I would have cleared my in tray. But I said, the in tray will get done. I'll drive down. I spend an hour with them. I just reassure them, we're going to look at this. You're going to be minded. You're going to be looked after. Just that, it's not that I got rid of the problem, but they were. I was hoping that by me doing that, they would feel valued and that they mattered,
Mm.
and that was an example of putting something that matters most before something that matters least. And people matter more than policies or
Oh
payment.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
love
You
that.
know,
Yeah.
so my mantra was that if the reason I can't see people is because of paperwork, well, I need to recheck.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
That's
And
so
people see
good.
that.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing.
Yeah.
That's just so much to digest. I'll
well,
have to
thank you for
listen to
giving
this
me
a
all the
couple of times.
You're very
Yeah.
kind and very generous with your time to allow me talk. I mean, I hope I'm not talking too much.
Oh, no,
No,
no.
I mean, you're hitting on all the things that we see the same issues here in the US. And like I said, that's one of the reasons I want to do this and share experiences from around the world, because I think we all kind of are in the same boat when it comes to education. And, you're hitting on so many of those issues and just articulating it in such a good way that, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So we've really enjoyed your message so far. Is
Thank
there,
you, Jeremy.
yeah, absolutely. So are there any other just nuggets of wisdom or anything that you would like to share for those in leadership and education?
Yeah, and again, these were lessons I learned the hard way, which are often the best. One thing I've learned is, you know, every time I worried or fretted about something or had a catastrophized image in my head as a leader, things never quite worked out as badly as I thought they would. So
Hmm.
just to bear in mind, try and keep a perspective, because a leader has to keep their head even when everybody else is losing theirs.
Hmm.
That's your role. Now, you're a human, but I've learned, I suppose, maybe I don't think seriously, but rather than worrying about something, take action, no
Yes.
matter how small. Take some action. There's great security in relieving anxiety by taking some action, and recognize that what you think is going to happen will probably not be as bad, anyway, as bad as you think it's going to be. The other tip I'd like to give, and I'm guilty of this myself: perfection, the enemy of progress.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think we do ourselves a huge disservice by expecting perfection. It's perfection is, I believe, is a concept of the world where there's no need for learning. I mean, my God, you only learn by making
Yeah.
mistakes. And when you think about it, Brad, we allow our children in the classroom to make mistakes. We encourage them to make mistakes and learn from them. Can we not extend the same courtesy to ourselves? Surely we deserve that. And the last thing I'll say is that I believe that 90% of success as a leader is showing up, just turning up.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's tempting to hide away when things are, oh, I'm not going there. Sometimes you've got to just brave it out and say, you know what? You cannot delegate showing up.
That's right. That's good. I like that. Yeah.
No, you cannot. Those 5% moments, like that one I was telling you about, that moment was never going to happen again. I could always do the paperwork another time. But if I didn't drive down there, I lost that moment. That's the 5% moment that builds your credibility and trust as a leader. And although it feels uncomfortable, I say to people, if you're feeling comfortable, there's something wrong. Because very often doing the right thing is uncomfortable. Doing the easy thing is where we're comfortable. And sometimes that's not a good sign. So if you feel a little bit, a bit uncomfortable, yeah, you know what, you're probably onto something.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's such
Absolutely,
good
yeah.
nuggets of advice. And I really love that you can't delegate showing up. I'll have to use that sometime. I really love that. My goodness. All right, we have one last hard question for you before we go, because this is called Lattes and Leaders.
Yes,
So what is your hot beverage of choice? Is it coffee, latte, cappuccino, hot tea, or something else?
it is a good old-fashioned Americano.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm not milk intolerant or anything, but I just like, don't like an espresso. That's too strong. But I like an Americano. I just like your average Americano. Yeah, that'll do me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful.
How do you take it?
Oh, I just take it black.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
I just take
yeah.
it black. Yeah. No frills, just straight up.
Oh yeah.
Well, you're tougher than me. I have to have a little creamer in mine. So, but thank you so much for being here today. Oh, you were just a wealth of knowledge. I love, all that you shared, the research that you've done. I mean, that's very eye-opening. And I hope that, when the teachers and leaders hear this, that they, think about that and really dwell on it and let that all sink in, because it's so powerful. But yeah, you had just so many words of nuggets of just wisdom. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Brad. And I'll just leave you with a line from an Irish poet who wrote about servant leadership. It's a beautiful line. I think it encompasses the way you think, Brad, and the way many of us think about what servant leadership is. And it is, may you be a servant of the frontier, where the new will draw its enrichment from the old, and may you never become a functionary.
Oh, I like that. Got
Yeah.
chill bumps.
John O'Donnell. It's John O'Donoghue, rather, not John O'Donnell. And an Irish greeting, Ganairi an Boherlat, agus Grev an Gui Gabrok the Chul. There's something in Irish for you.
Nice.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love that.
That means may the road rise to meet you, and may the wind be always at your back.
Now, I knew it in English, but that sounded so much better in Irish.
Well, thank you so much to the two of you for giving me this space. And you were so generous with it.
Well, yeah. We've had a great time hanging out with you this morning, and we hope to have you back on very soon.
Oh, I'd love that. Thank you.
This has been Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson. We hope that you leave today feeling informed and inspired. For more educational content, be sure to add this podcast to your list and follow Dr. Johnson on any and all social media platforms. For more information on Dr. Johnson, Jeremy Johnson, and special guests, check out drbradjohnson.com. That is DOCTOR, bradjohnson.com. Hope to have you back soon.